My name is Malaki Samson. I'm an architect and a designer with the National Museums of Kenya. And part of what we do at the National Museums of Kenya is basically to carry out exhibitions. And we have quite iconic items within our museum galleries. And it's critical to note that National Museums of Kenya is actually anchored on 3 pillars. One of the pillars is culture, the other pillar is nature, and the other pillar is history. I'll talk about Siwa. This is actually Siwa, and is one of our iconic collection within this particular space. These are a sacred horn. It is a carved, ceremonial, side-blown horn or other musical instrument that was used along the coastline, East African coastline, and especially in the Lamu Island and the Pate Island. This year was used between the 17th century and the 18th century with the upper class community, especially along the coastline. And the reason why it's very, very instrumental is basically because of its usage. During that particular time in the 17th and the 18th century, it was used for various purposes. One, it was used for cultural activities, and some of the cultural activities where this musical instrument was used was for royal weddings. It was used during circumcision ceremonies. It was also used during installation of the Swahili leaders, especially in Lamu and of course Pate. As it is right now, you realize that we have 2 different types of Siwa. The first type of Siwa is the one that was found in the island of Lamu, which was basically made using brass material. And the type of Siwa that you have here, is a type of Siwa that is ivory in nature because it was fabricated in ivory, and it was fabricated in 1688 in the Pate Island. And the one that is very, very iconic, comparing it to the brass Siwa. This Siwa, as you can tell, is quite interesting in nature. Is quite interesting in design. You see that it's carved, and by virtue of it being carved, it actually provided an orientation for it to be used well. It has got 2 parts. We have the left side and we have the right side, and is anchored at the center. And right at the center, there is a hole. So for it to be used, when it was being used during that particular time, it was being held by 2 hands because it is approximately 2 meters long and approximately weighing 18 kilograms. So it was quite heavy. So it was held using 2 hands, one hand toward the extreme left and another hand toward the extreme right, and blown at the center. And the reason why it was being blown at the center is because a musical instrument, and its purpose was basically to call people for meetings. It was actually a way of trying to assemble people. You realize that it was it's actually an instrument that was used by the leaders to call people to order. To a certain instance, it was actually used in the 16th and 17th in the 17th and 18th century to call people to war. So it's actually a very, very sacred horn. It's a very, very sacred instrument among the Swahili people. The other purpose of why this particular item is on display here is because of its significance. You realize that among the Swahili people, it was a symbol of unity. It was a symbol of peace. It was a symbol of authority. It was a symbol of royalty, and it was a symbol of power. So once they blow this particular instrument, what used to happen is that whoever heard the sound that were coming from this Siwa, because it was a very powerful sound, definitely they left whatever they were doing just to respond to that particular call, because it was believed that that particular call was very sacred. It was believed that that particular call shouldn't have been missed out, and it used to travel miles and miles away to assemble people. It is an exhibit also that was used mainly by the royalties, the upper class residents in Lamu and Pate Islands. So it was a preserve of the few. It was a preserve of the royal class. It was a preserve of the authorities within that particular establishment or community. It was also believed to have a natural and magical powers. What do I mean? And that's why at the point where this Siwa was being blown, anybody who heard the voice of the Siwa, they actually had to leave whatever they were doing just to assemble. And that's why to us as National Museums of Kenya, it's a very, very iconic exhibit. It's a very, very priceless exhibit because we only have 2 Siwas in the country. As I mentioned, they were used between the 17th and the 18th century, which means they are currently not in use. And that's why, as National Museums of Kenya, we took them up so that we can be able to preserve them for posterity. And that's why one of the Siwa, which is made of ivory, is within the National Museums of Kenya headquarters, and the other Siwa is actually at the Lamu Museum. The reason why he's also here is because of his cultural value. You realize that within this particular space of National Museums of Kenya, this is what we call the Hall of Kenya, and it's actually a hall that exhibits the iconic items. As I mentioned before, we are anchored on 3 main pillars of culture, nature, and history, and it's just one of the iconic collections we have in the National Museums of Kenya galleries. We have others, but we just chose to have this particular item on display because we only have 2 in the country and because they are very, very priceless. And of course, as you can see, by virtue of its design, is very, very intricate. You realize you have some Arabic inscriptions on it. You realize that the etching was done to scale. The etching was very, very precise. And by virtue of that, it gives it that particular authentic look. It gives it that particular beautiful look. And that's why, by virtue of its, apart from the function that it serves, just looking at it will actually encourage you to continue looking at it because of its nature, because of the design, because of the inscription, because of the details that went into this. And it was handmade. It was done by craftsmen that, of course, were residing along the coastline. And as mentioned, that was basically the Pate Island and, of course, the Lamu Island.